Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Genealogy, presented to you tonight by the West Hempstead Public Library. I'd like to present your host, our librarian in-house, Jean King. Jean, take it away.
Okay. Hi, good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming to the program tonight. So this is going to be two topics in one meeting. The first half of the presentation is going to be about naturalization records. Then I'm going to switch over to talk about military records. And it might take me a minute to reset myself after the naturalization section of the talk, but hopefully everything will go smoothly. So I wanted to start our naturalization talk showing everyone the certificate of naturalization for my two grandparents on my father's side. They were both naturalized in Mineola. My grandmother, Lempi, and my grandfather, Paavo, were both from Finland. And according to what my father told us, the reason they became naturalized citizens is because after World War II started, they were afraid for some reason that they might be deported back to Finland if they didn't become citizens. And as you can see on the certificates, it has both of their photos and the information about where they were living and the date that they became citizens. So I wanted to go over a brief overview of how naturalizations take place. It's a two-step process where a person first fills out a declaration of intention, and then after meeting residency requirements, will fill out a petition for naturalization. However, not all our ancestors ever became naturalized citizens. Some people might have filled out the first set of papers, the Declaration of Intention, but then never followed through with the petition for naturalization. Another complication when searching for these records is the possibility that your ancestor may have filed their first papers, which is the Declaration of Intention, in one court, and then several years later, filed the petition for naturalization in a different court or even in a different state. A person needed to be a resident for 2 years before they could file the Declaration of Intention papers, and then had to wait at least 3 years before they filed a petition for naturalization. Both of these documents can contain a lot of genealogy information, but depending on the year they were filed, we'll see that there could be little information early on and quite a bit more detailed information when we get to 1906. So here's a very abbreviated timeline of naturalization procedures and laws. Naturalization first became into law in 1790, where it was allowed for free white adult alien males who had resided within the United States for 2 years. And in 1795, free white females were able to become citizens. And at this point, the residency requirement went from 2 years to 5 years and actually established the two-step process we talked about, where you would file the Declaration of Intention and then the petition for naturalization. There was a big problem with this, though, because during the 1800s and even into the early 1900s, there was no set process for this to take place. There were many courts all over the country where people could file these papers, and at one point there were over 5,000 federal, state, and local courts processing naturalization records, and there was no central location that was keeping copies of any of these papers. In addition, different courts charged different fees and they used different forms. So in 1906, the Basic Naturalization Act standardized the forms and fees and the courts that could process naturalization papers. And in addition to this, the courts were all required to send a copy to the Bureau of Immigration in Washington. And also they added knowledge of English and literacy as a requirement to become a naturalized citizen. In 1929, photos were required. In 1933, the name was changed from Bureau of Immigration to Immigration and Naturalization Service, the INS. In 1952, declarations of intention were no longer required. In 1992, courts no longer naturalized citizens or kept naturalization records. And in 2003, the INS became the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Service, which is what we know it today and is part of Homeland Security. So I wanted to discuss a few different types of scenarios that come up when we talk about naturalization records. There were different rules that apply to women and children during the years that you would need to keep in mind when you're searching for naturalization records for your relatives. With women from 1790 to 1922, if a woman of a naturalized man became, the wife of a naturalized man became a citizen, the woman also became a citizen without filing any paperwork. And this also was true if an immigrant woman married a US citizen. So you wouldn't be searching for naturalization records for your female ancestors if they became naturalized citizens before 1922. After 1922, they could file their own naturalization papers and did not automatically become a citizen if they married an American or a naturalized citizen. With children, up until 1940, children under 21 automatically became citizens upon naturalization of their father. But they had a choice after 1929 if they wished to apply for naturalization papers in their own name. So again, it might be that your ancestor did not file their own naturalization papers if their father became a citizen before that person was 21. Then there came the Act of March 2nd, 1907, where American women who married an immigrant would lose their citizenship and take on the nationality of their husband. And if their husband became naturalized, then she became a naturalized citizen, even though she was born in the United States. And if he didn't become a citizen, she would have to go through the naturalization process in order to regain her American citizenship. And so this is quite unusual, but this continued on until the Cable Act of 1922, where American women who married an immigrant did not lose their citizenship as long as their husband was eligible to become a citizen. But there was still this other condition that if she lived abroad for 2 years with her immigrant husband in his home country, or for 5 years outside of the US, she would lose her citizenship. In 1931, the restrictions were finally lifted for American women marrying immigrants. In 1936, women who lost their citizenship between 1907 and 1922, and their husband was either deceased or she was divorced, the woman could then regain her citizenship by taking an oath of allegiance and not having to do all the paperwork to regain her citizenship. And finally, in 1940, any woman who had lost her citizenship by marriage was able to regain it by taking an oath of allegiance. The other exceptions to naturalization procedures had to do with the military. Back in 1862, during the Civil War, honorably discharged Army veterans only had to live in the country for a year and did not have to file a petition of intention in order to become a naturalized citizen. And in 1894, this applied also to veterans in the Navy and the Marines, with the same condition that they only had to live in the country for a year before filing a petition for naturalization. In 1918, requirements were waived again for men who were fighting during World War I. The men could apply for citizenship without the 5-year waiting period or without filing the Declaration of Intention. And these naturalizations generally took place at military bases or courts that were near a military base. In 1942, the residency requirement again was waived. People didn't have to fill out the Declaration of Intention, just the petition for naturalization and take the oath of allegiance. And the National Archives in New York City has military petitions for World War I, World War II, and the Korean War, but it is only for New York and New Jersey, because that's the territory that's covered by the National Archives in Lower Manhattan. So before 1906, naturalization records really contained very little information. Typically, you just would find a person's address, names of witnesses, and the name of the country and the ruler of the country that the person was formerly a citizen of. And so there's not going to be a lot to help you with your genealogy research in these earlier naturalization records. However, after 1906, when the standardized forms came into being, you could find a lot more information about your relatives. For example, here's some information we could find on the Declaration of Intention forms: their name, age, occupation, physical description, place and date of birth, last foreign residence, their marital status with their spouse's name and birth location, the date and port of arrival and the name of the ship they came over on, their present address. And after 1929, it also would include a photo, and asked if the person was married or had children and list the name of the spouse and the children. And they also had to declare if they were an anarchist or a polygamist. Now, on the petition for naturalization forms, you'll get some of this same information. It also would ask them the date when their US residence began, the length of residence in the state, any name changes, and again, it would list the information about their spouse and their children, which can be a great deal of help to you, identifying where their children were born and also information about their spouse. Originals of naturalization records are for New York, New Jersey, and Puerto Rico are kept at the National Archives in Lower Manhattan at 1 Bowling Green in the former Custom House building. However, I emailed to them today out of curiosity to see if they were processing any requests for documents right now. And the answer I got back was that until further notice, they are on very limited staffing and are only dealing with emergency issues. And the staff are working remotely from home and have no access to the records. So normally, before COVID, you would be able to send a request in writing to get copies of naturalization records from the National Archives or go in person. And obviously that's not happening right now. They've been closed since, I think, March of 2020 at this point. And who knows when they're actually going to be reopening. But for informational purposes, here are some of the naturalization records that you could find in the National Archives. They have all the federal courts, the federal, state, and local courts for New York City going back to 1792. They have Clinton and Essex County naturalization records up to 1906. They have the district courts for New Jersey and Puerto Rico. But luckily, you can also get copies of naturalization records from the county clerk's office, such as in Mineola or Riverhead. And that's actually where I got my grandparents' naturalization records, were from Mineola. I've also gotten them in Jamaica at the county clerk's office in Queens. So even though you can't get them from Manhattan right now, there are other locations that you could try. And we'll see in a few minutes that some of them are also on Ancestry.com. So one of the best ways to determine whether or not your relative was naturalized is a naturalization index that's on the German genealogy and Italian genealogy groups websites. These naturalization indexes were created by volunteers from the German genealogy group, the Italian genealogy group, and the Jewish Genealogy Society of New York. And these are naturalization records for all individuals. It's not based on any ethnic groups. And I'm going to just give you a brief overview of the types of courts that are available in the index. So we have the Eastern District and Southern District Courts of New York. We have the U.S. Circuit Court. We have Northern District and Western District Courts. So I listed out the counties here that are covered in the different district courts. You can see Southern District will go up through the Hudson Valley. Eastern District is generally Long Island. And we have Western District and Northern Districts. There's records for the Bronx, for Nassau County, Queens, Staten Island, Suffolk. And there's even a civil service naturalization list that's on the German genealogy website. That's for 1905 and 1906. That lists naturalization certificates of people who took civil service exams in New York City. In addition, we have New Jersey and Puerto Rico. And I wanted to include some examples of other counties who have websites with naturalization indexes, like Westchester, Albany, Ulster, and Dutchess counties, as well as the index that was created for Brooklyn for 1907 to 1924, that was indexed by the Jewish Genealogy Society of New York. If you don't have luck finding your ancestor in this index, there's a few alternate records you might want to take a look at. On the US federal census records for 1870, 1900, 1910, 20, 30, and 40, they have columns pertaining to citizenship. You'll see abbreviations on the census records that are AL, meaning alien, PA, first papers, which are the declarations of intention. NA means they've already finished the naturalization process. And in 1940, they added another code, this AM Cit, meaning that the person was born abroad but was considered an American citizen at birth. You can also find citizenship status on New York State Census records for 1865, 75, 1892, 1905, 1915, and 1925. Sometimes on passenger lists, you will see the date in the court where your relative was naturalized, but this is kind of hit and miss. There's sometimes you luck out and sometimes you don't. If your relative filled out a World War I draft registration card, it'll ask if the person was a citizen. And also if your relative files a passport application, it could list the year and location that their naturalization took place. So websites that we would go to look for naturalization indexes and images are Ancestry.com, which right now is still has free remote access until the end of December. And this has been going on, I would say, for over a year now. Ancestry has let patrons of libraries that subscribe to Ancestry.com to have free remote access at home during the pandemic. So do all your searching now in the next 2 months, because we don't know if they're going to continue it into the next year. You can also try FamilySearch.org, which is the website of the Mormon Church, and that is always free. There are 2 other databases, MyHeritage.com and Fold3.com. And if you know someone who has a Suffolk County Library card, or if you want to go to a Suffolk County Library, you could use these databases for free. Both of them are subscription websites. Fold3 actually is owned by Ancestry, but you have to pay a separate subscription for it. And when it goes on sale, it might be around $50 for the year. But MyHeritage can get very pricey, maybe between $250, $300 a year. And as part of your handout, I have included these websites. I would suggest the first one, the Family Search Wiki, as a great place to start to learn more about naturalization and citizenship records. They do a really good job of explaining things and giving you resources to try to locate these records. And then here's a few other links to New York State Archives and National Archives, and a few other sites to look at. Ancestor Hunt, Cindy's List, and GermanRoots.com. So now I wanted to show you this is the German Genealogy Group website, and this is their Naturalization Records Index page. And you can see the different courts like we talked about earlier. And if you scroll down to the bottom, this is where you could do a search. Again, here's all the courts. You can pick an individual court. You could just search for all of them. Okay, and then so here's the search results for some of my relatives. And they were all naturalized in Southern District Court, which is the National Archives, would be the place that would have copies of these naturalization records. And if you click this button here that says Documents and Forms, the website has these pre-done letters that you can send to request copies of naturalization records. Now, of course, we can't really do it for National Archives right now because they're not open. But like, for example, if you wanted to do Nassau County, you could mail this to Mineola, or you could take it over to Mineola and give them the $5, and you could get a copy of your the naturalization record. And they have the letters for Bronx, Queens, Staten Island, Suffolk County, Westchester. Okay. Now let's flip over. This is the National Archives page listing the different naturalization records that are available in New York City. And if you click on these links, it will take you most probably to Ancestry.com for a lot of these. But this really spells out exactly what the records are that are in Manhattan. And they give you some more information about Ancestry, Fold 3, and the indexes we just talked about. Then I wanted to give you an idea of the types of data sets you might find on Ancestry.com. Okay, they have Dutchess County naturalization records, the state and federal naturalization records going up to 1943. They have alien depositions. They have Central and Western New York papers, but only the early ones going up to 1847. We have another set of naturalization records for New York. They have World War I soldier naturalization records, and they have this collection of American Jewish Historical Society records for the early 1800s, with declarations of intent going up to 1845. So if we flip over to Ancestry, okay, so we're in the e-research page of our library, and we go to genealogy, and you're going to want to click on this link that says access from home and put in your library card. Okay, then if we go over to immigration and travel, this is where you find citizenship and naturalization records. And okay, so here are some of my relatives, and I wanted to show you. Oh, there are index cards, and there's also records. Sorry. Okay, there's my grandfather. Right, this is my great grandfather. And all right, so this one was done in 1893, so there's really not a lot of information, just that he was from Turkey. So he was renouncing the Sultan of Turkey. And basically that's about all you find out. But if we go to a newer one, okay, as a comparison, okay, great-grandfather's cousin didn't file his naturalization papers until the 1920s, and you can see we've got the pre-printed form. We have information about his wife, where she was born, and the information about their children with the dates they were born in, the cities they were born in, and that they were both living with him at the time. Here's his witness statements down here. So you can see there's a big difference between before 1906 and after 1906. And sometimes if you turn the page, yeah. And then if you go to the second page, you'll see his witnesses and the date that he was admitted as a citizen. And just wanted to go over a few things on family search for naturalization records. Again, they have similar records covering Eastern District, Southern District courts with indexes. They have some Western District courts. And with family search, I'm logged in already. You need to create a free username and password in order to see the records. But if you go to records, and if we put in New York naturalizations, you can see that they have county naturalizations, the Eastern District, Southern Districts. So not as much as Ancestry, but it's always good to check in different places. If you don't find someone in Ancestry, you can always try looking in Family Search or MyHeritage. And Family Search just redid their website, so it's a little, I'm not used to some of the things on here just yet, but let's give this a try. Okay, with Family Search, you can we can just look at immigration and naturalization records by clicking some boxes over here. And let's give this a try. Okay, so here are a naturalization record for another relative. And if we blow this up, no. Yeah, he filed his after 1906 also. So you've got the details about where he immigrated from, where he had been living previously, his address here in New York. And he actually changed his name. So this is the name he was naturalized under, but they actually included his birth surname on the naturalization papers. So you would know that you had the right person. Okay, so I am going to conclude this part so that we can get started on military records. So I just need a second to get myself reset here. Yeah, let me just close this out because I've got to get my other tabs set up. Okay, so now we're ready to switch over to military records. And I know that military records is a very complex subject, but I wanted to give you a overview to give you an idea in general where you would go to get started looking for military records for your ancestor. There's many good free webinars you might find online about specific types of military records, but we're just going to get a start on it in general. So I was thinking, where would you go to look for clues about whether your relative served in the military? I would imagine for a lot of people, they would get this information from hearing family stories or talking to relatives, or maybe you even have documents at home of relatives who served in the military. There's also something called the 1890 Federal Census, which you can find on Ancestry and Family Search. In the 1865 New York State Census, it asked people if they were previously or currently employed in the military or naval service. The US Federal Census in 1910 asked people if they were a survivor of the Union or Confederate Army or Navy. In the 1930 census, people were just asked if they were a veteran and what war. And in 1940, there was a supplemental question, which was only asked of a few people per page in the census records, but it did ask them if the person was a veteran of the US military. I think another great place you might find information is in a person's obituary or a local newspaper article. I've seen articles in local papers about relatives joining the military, being on leave from the military, where they're stationed while they're in the military. So that might be another good place to try. The German Genealogy Group website that we were just looking at has databases for Suffolk County Civil War veterans, for Brookhaven, town of Brookhaven veterans, and also veteran discharge records for Suffolk County. And finally, something that I've used a lot is checking websites that list veteran burials. And I have a list of those websites on the handout for the military records. I've used this one called Grave Locator many times, and that's run by the Veteran Administration Department. So where are federal military records kept? There. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh my gosh. No, oh no. Where? I have to find. Okay, so sorry, everyone. I thought I was screen sharing when I wasn't. Okay, I know we've got a lot to get through in a short amount of time, but okay, so what I was mentioning in the top half of this slide is clues that places you would look for clues to see whether your ancestor was in the military. I was talking about perhaps family stories or documents you might have at home. Census records from New York State in 1865, the 1890 Veterans Federal Census, which you could find on Ancestry and Family Search, US Federal Census records in 1910 and 1930, also asked if people had been in the military, as well as the 1940 census supplemental question, which was only asked of a few people per page. And that question asked if the person was a veteran of the US military. We also have websites that list veteran burials, such as one that's run by the Veterans Administration Department, and those are included in the handout. And the German Genealogy Group website, which we looked at earlier, has databases for Suffolk County Civil War veterans, town of Brookhaven veterans, and veteran discharge records for Suffolk County. Okay, so federal military records are kept in two locations. They're kept in the National Archives in Washington, D.C., and these would be considered the early military records, and the newer military records are kept in St. Louis. So in Washington, D.C., they have records for volunteers up to 1902, Army records up to 1917 for officers, Navy records up to 1902 for officers, Marine Corps records up to 1904 for enlisted men, They have Coast Guard records for predecessor agencies up to 1919. And they also have claims files for pensions up to 1916 and bounty land warrant application files up to 1855. We'll take a look at the website in a few minutes, but these are some links to the National Archives in Washington, D.C. Now, the newer records are kept at the National Personnel Records Center in St. Louis. However, there was a fire in 1973 that destroyed 80% of the paperwork for Army personnel discharged between 1912 and 1960, which of course includes World War I, World War II, Korean War, etc. And 75% of the paperwork for Air Force personnel discharged between 1947 and January 1st, 1964, but only for names after James E. Hubbard. Because of this, the reason it was so devastating was because no duplicate copies of these records had ever been maintained. They never made microfilm copies, and there was no indexes created for any of these records. So it was hard to even determine how much had been destroyed in the fire. The records that are kept in St. Louis are covered under a law that restricts access to the records for 62 years. And after that, they're open to the public. And anyone can request copies of these records. Okay, and then for Army records, you know, they begin as far back as 1912. Air Force records start after 1947. Navy records go back as far as 1884. Marine Corps, 1904. Coast Guard, 1887. So you need to know what, based on the year, you'll know whether to apply for records at Washington, D.C. or in St. Louis. However, due to COVID, it's pretty much impossible to get records out of St. Louis right now because they're only at 45% capacity, according to this note on their website. And right now they're only dealing with emergency situations like burials, medical treatment forms, and homeless veterans. And they're requesting that nobody put in requests for records research until they've returned to 100% of their staffing level. And again, who knows when that might take place at this point. But just so you have the information going forward, that you understand that the records are in two different locations based on the year the person was serving in the military. And we'll look at their websites in a minute. I'm sorry. Oh. Military record.
It says one tab, and we're going to see your military records, US and New York, Google Docs,
Yeah.
and so forth and so on.
Okay. So you see that, right?
Yep. I'm just going to show you so we can go over it. I'm recording still, but I just want to make sure
sorry.
that this is what we're seeing.
Oh gosh. No.
Okay, so you're not showing the right screen. And
Oh,
that's okay, everyone.
Oh my gosh, how did I get this all messed up? Okay, so let's talk about New York State military records very quickly. New York State Archives in Albany has military records up to and including World War I. However, their colonial military records were destroyed in yet another fire, and this was in 1911. But New York State Archives, you can request abstracts from them of military service. They have abstracts for World War I military service for the Army, Navy, and Marines. The archives also has militia and National Guard commissioned officer records from 1800 to 1899. They have National Guard muster rolls, They also have service cards for National Guard members who were discharged prior to World War II. Okay, and databases that you can use for military research include Ancestry.com, that are same for family search, Fold3 and MyHeritage. And we're going to take a look at some of these websites right now. Okay, this is the National Archives Military Records Research page. And you would just click on the branch of service that you're interested in to find out more information about the records that they have. You can also scroll down here and you can search by conflict. So I think they've done a nice job of laying out everything for you here. They even have further research that you might want to look at about historical military records and the military personnel records. Okay, this is the National Personnel Records Center page. This would be for your newer records. And here's their statement, how they're really not doing records research right now. But you know, this is the page you would want to go to read further about how to request military records from St. Louis, the overview of the records, and they even have an article about the fire in 1973 that I briefly mentioned. Okay. This is the military records page for New York State Archives. They have a lot of information on this page about how you can order records from them. They charge a very minimal fee. I think the most they charge is $5. You would fill out one of their request forms in order to get information from them. They have this Pathfinder where you can click on any of these conflicts and find out more information about what they have in the New York State Archives. Okay, they also tell you at the bottom they even have bounty land warrant records prior to World War I. I'm sorry, those are at National Archives. And this is the information they have on Civil War service abstracts and the request form you can use. Okay, another website you might find interesting is the New York State Military Museum and Veterans Research Center, and they're in Saratoga Springs. Okay, they have information on soldiers and sailors. They have this oral history project. They have unit histories. They give you some links to other types of records. And they also have publications from the National Guard, as well as these yearbooks. Okay. These are some of the types of military records you can find at Ancestry.com. On the right side is how many records are in the collection. So you can see that some of their biggest record collections have to do with World War II and World War I, as well as the Marine Corps muster rolls. They also have information on veterans' grave sites, Veterans Administration Master Index, Civil War records, Navy records, pension indexes, and they also have New York State military records having to do with the National Guard again, some 1812 records, World War I, World War II, veteran burial cards, etc. So again, if we go back to our website, On Ancestry, you can just limit your search to military. Waiting. Okay, and just using my family as an example, we can see World War I draft registration cards, World War II, Army enlistment records, National Guard service. This is the Veterans Affairs death file for my uncle. And we can open up one of these cards just to show you some of the detail. This is my grandfather. And so it had his address, his phone number, date of birth, where he was born. This is my grandmother. This is his business address. And if you turn the card over, it gives you his height, weight, eye color, hair color, which is kind of cool. And what the local board is he went to register at. And there are similar draft cards for World War I. This is my great-grandfather's cousin. So it's his address in Manhattan. And here it says he's a naturalized citizen. So this is on the World War I draft registration cards. The cards for World War I, everyone had to register regardless of whether they were a citizen or not. And so that's why these are helpful with the naturalization, searching for naturalization papers. So where he was born, who employed him, whether he was single, and then again, his description, medium, black eyes, black hair, and his signature. Okay, and come on. Where is my back button? It disappeared.
Right there.
No, there's an all results button that should be there. Okay. And there it is. And this is there's no image for this, but this is one of my relatives who enlisted in World War II. And it tells you where he was a citizen of, that he had 2 years of college, he was working as a clerk, his enlistment date, his height and weight. So, I mean, and there's just many more types of military records you can find in Ancestry, but that's just a couple. And then my uncle, here's his death file, where, we even get his social security number, that he served in the Army, and it gives you his enlistment date and discharge date. And just a little quick thing, in Ancestry, they also give you suggested records when you're searching. But okay, so let's quickly go on to Family Search. FamilySearch.org also has military records. As you can see, they have quite a lot for the Civil War. They also have Revolutionary War, Mexican War, War of 1812. They also have the World War I draft registration cards. They have headstone applications for US veterans. They have the National Home for Disabled Volunteer Soldiers. I actually found somebody in there. So again, all different types of records. And like we did before, we could search and just limit our search to military records. By going to collections and military records. And here's just like here's my grandfather's brother who was in the National Guard. And so you could see his National Guard card. There's not a lot of detail, but you can see that he served in the National Guard. Okay, I also, very quickly, I was talking about Fold 3 earlier, and I really wanted to show you it. 1 second. Okay, I can do this because I have a Suffolk County Library card. So okay, Fold 3 used to be called footnote.com many years ago. And Fold 3 specializes in military records. And they were bought by Ancestry. But like I said, you need a separate subscription. Even if you had an Ancestry subscription, it wouldn't cover Fold 3. But they've redesigned their website recently. And so you can search by country and you can search by conflict. They also have some naturalization records in this non-military section. And if you, or up here, you can just search by person. You can browse the records and you can search by conflict that way, or by country, or by type of record. And then they have you can search their records alphabetically. So if we went to the Civil War, they give you a little bit of information. And then if you wanted to search for somebody, so this is the only relative I have that was in the Civil War, but it will give you information about Navy survivor certificates, pension information. Naval Corps, he was in the Navy. He was an engineer in the Navy in the Civil War for the Union. So with Fold 3, if you're interested in it, you can always do a 7-day trial. Or again, if you can get over to a Suffolk County Library, you could use it for free. And usually, see, this is part of his pension packet, Civil War pension packet. And these records are kept in Washington, D.C. in the National Archives. But it's really a great website. And, you know, if you're starting off on military research, it might be worth doing the free trial. So I've run over a little bit, but I just wanted to let everyone know that I also do a blog for the library, a genealogy blog. And if you're interested, myheritage.com is having unlimited access right now to all their death, burial, cemetery, and obituary records for Halloween. So if you haven't tried MyHeritage, you would need to set up a free username and password to see the records, but that is going on if you wanted to take a look at MyHeritage. So I post on the blog different programs that are coming up, like this Jewish genealogy workshop. Every week I post free webinars that are given around the country. And whenever the major websites have a free weekend, which they'll probably be doing around Veterans Day, I'm hoping some of them will give you free access to military records. So if you want to check my blog, I'll have the information as soon as I get it. If Ancestry and probably MyHeritage will run some free access to military records around Veterans Day. So that's my summary.
Any email address or anything that they can send any questions to? They can email you, they can come see you.
Yeah.
Anything?
Yep. Can come see me, you can call me.
I have a question, I believe. It says, Marie says, thank you, it's great information.
You're welcome. I know it was pretty fast there at the end, but
All right. Is there any other questions? You can unmute yourself at this time. We are still recording. I just want to leave this recording for a little bit longer. If you don't want to be recorded, you can also tell me that as well, and I will stop recording you. But just for examples or questions, somebody else might be interested. Any questions, anyone?
oh,
Oh,
And-
I have 2 questions.
oh.
Oh, 3. Okay.
Oh,
Thank you.
and
thank
in
you.
January.
Yes, this program is a 4-part series. I know on the website it listed it as a 2-part. This is the second part, but this is second part of a 4-part series. So the next part will be coming up in January.
And I'll be doing we're going to look at the website familysearch.org that's run by the Mormon Church. There's a lot of interesting parts to it, and I'd like to just take the time and take you on a tour of that website.
Okay, remarkable. We have another comment, and thank you so much, and for all your hard work. That's from Mike. So I'm going to stop the recording right now, but I ask everyone, please don't leave just yet. Let's stop the recording. So once again, thank you all for attending our genealogy program. The next part of this series will be hosted in the same format in January. Please check our website for further details. Just stand by, everybody.